Command Point is sponsored by Crossfire Games. Use code CommandPoint25 at checkout to get 5% off your next purchase. Link in the description.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Command Point podcast for the first time in so long. It feels like it is episode something, I'll never know. But I am joined here today by two esteemed, wonderful guests, a couple of my neighbors right across the border up in Ontario, Canada. Two of the best players in Ontario, Canada. I'm going to introduce them one by one. First of all, I have the reigning from last year's ITC number one player in Canada and New York Open champion back in October. I have George R. Moore. George, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think last time I had you on here, it was for it was probably 12 Days of Kill Team for Warp Coven. So it's been
I
a
think
little
so,
while.
yeah. Yeah, it's back when Warp Coven were fun for everyone. So
Oh yeah, still are. And then also joining us today is the now champion of the Chimera GT, Max Hannibal. Max, how's it going?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Great to be here.
Yeah, always good to have you. I mean, obviously, I have. There's been a lot of tournaments up in Ontario that I've been going to, and I see you guys quite regularly at this point. The Chimera GT was a pretty big one, and we're going to talk about that today. But before we talk about that, there was a Dataslate that just came out yesterday at the time of this recording, and of course we need to talk about it. But I know you, the listener, already know everything that happened because you've already listened to Canula Crit or Glass Half Dead or somebody else that talked about it line by line. So we're not going to talk about it line by line. But guys, I do want to have like a kind of open discussion, I guess, on what we think of the changes, on what we think of the meta. And then once we're done talking about that, we'll get into the GT a little bit. But I mean, anybody have anything they want to talk about off the top?
Well,
do you
I
think we
think
should
it's
talk about
clearly they knew I was coming to play hard at the Chimera GT, and they said, like, let's stop Max getting out of control and put these Felgor in their place.
Yeah. I mean, the Felgor, that's what you just won with. It's what I won Adepticon with. A team near and dear to my heart. George, you're not a Felgor player, so I guess I want to get your perspective first on what you think about some of the Felgor nerfs that we saw.
So just to put into context, Max was my only loss on the weekend. I was running Corsairs and I played him on round 5 of 6. It was my Corsairs versus his goats, and he kicked my ass. So I'm quite happy about the potential nerfs to Velgor. I just think that they've kind of got both sides of the coin, right? They've got really good durability. So the action economy needed to kill a goat is just puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. So they're wasting like kind of 1-2 activations or actions just trying to put the goats down. But then on the flip side, the goats are really explosive as well. Max got me with an absolutely backbreaking 20.3 Blood Sense, I think it was, where he took out 2 elves in the GA2. And just like the kind of explosivity and like the kind of the random chip they have just across the team, which I'm sure you guys will talk about, definitely needed to be toned down a little bit. So I think the ambush change is quite a big hit for their consistency because they often want to get the 3 dice if they initiate a charge in a fight. So that will help a little bit. And the other change I was really happy to see was bringing all the goats apart from the leader back down to 10 wounds. That's just easier for the non-Felgor players to remember and helps quite a few of the teams with stuff like power weapons and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. It's a good shout bringing up the fact that they had a lot of chip. They still do have a lot of chip, but they definitely toned it down a little bit here with the Tech Curse nerf. Max, I know you and I were celebrating some spicy Tech Curse tech with the ammo cache.
Oh, it was juicy. It was very juicy, and I'm thankful that you put me onto it right at the start of the GT with a cheeky little ammo cache placed in your territory. You can set up some really silly chip damage, and yeah, it's probably for the best that it got toned a little bit down. But yeah, it was very interesting to have a melee horde have some full seek action, which was ended up being quite meaningful on more than a few occasions.
Yeah, and,
You
and
killed
it,
you
go
killed
ahead,
my
George.
you killed my shredder over 2 turning points in our game, Max. I remember. So it must have been quite nice for you to be on the other side of that, because early on in the edition, I was driving Max insane with Mind Burn, with the Warp Weapon Mind Burn. So this Felgor tech with the ammo cache and the weapon curse feels like a bit of like a Poundland dollar store version of Mind Burn, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot more fun to be on this side of it, but I completely understand why it's such a thing that needs to be reined in.
Yeah, I was very excited about the ammo cache. It's shaman, and it was fun. It was always funny when you discover something, and the first time you tell somebody, they laugh and they think it's a joke, and then you have to explain, no, I'm being serious. This is real, because for those of you unaware, the 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 play basically is you put a ammo cache in your drop zone where you're going to stage and deploy the shaman who had this full seek 1-3 rending saturate tech curse shooting attack, and you give him balanced on the attack basically, and you get 5 chances at a crit, because if that weapon gets a crit, all of a sudden it's doing some pretty decent spike damage, and with the 5th attempt to roll a crit, you have it's like a 10% jump in getting it. So, and it was really nice, and it's rare with an ammo cache that you're actually able to get shots on it, like with it, like turn 1 and 2 and maybe onward. Usually you take the ammo cache and like you get a shot on turn 2 with balanced, and then you hope to keep it throughout the other turns. But Felgor are really good at getting it just every turn, because of that shaman. And then if you stage a leader or something later, it's pretty meaningful. But the chip has definitely gone down. They've still got the Vandal and the Toxhorn to do a little chip damage, so it's not totally gone. But I think the biggest nerf here is the ambush nerf, and I'm sure Max, you'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I found being a newer Felgor player, I was leaning on turning on both Violent Temperament and Ambush at the same time, and like towards the end of the tournament, I was realizing, yeah, no, you only really need Ambush because of just how insane it is. But now I think it's a little bit more sensible, and maybe you lean a bit more on Violent Temperament and try and go for the full rerolls.
Yeah, I mean, not needing temperament was definitely really nice, and I was probably, I would say, too much, because I found that with the Brass Adornments equipment, where you get free uses of your +1 movement and your +1 crit damage, you're saving CP there that you'd be spending. So with Ambush allowing you to retain a fail as a hit, you could pass up on Violent Temperament and then save a little bit more CP that way. And whereas like last edition, it only let you turn a hit into a crit like it does now after the nerf. So like you said, just to echo that, I think temperament is going to be important.
Yeah, I think
A
that's a
lot of
big
the
change.
operatives have ceaseless and rerolls baked into their data sheets anyway. I know the Mangler and Flux Spray, they've got their stuff already on their data sheet. So it's definitely a hit to the team, but it's certainly not a fatal blow.
No, George, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just agreeing. It just cuts down their consistency and makes probably the Felgor player think a little bit more about which combats they try and go into, because oftentimes you wanting to retain 3 hits. So if you only have 4 dice with limited rerolls, there's a slightly higher chance you're stuck on 2 dice and can be parried out. So I think the opponents of the Felgor players will be happy with this change.
Yeah, maybe with this nerf, I'll look at the Gore Marks equipment a little bit more too. I wasn't usually taking it too often, but there might be a place for it now with a little bit less baked in reliability.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, George, what do you want to touch on? Because there's a few others, and I think we can leave a little bit more Felgor talk for later.
Yeah, sounds good. Because they're fresh in my mind, I'll touch upon the nerfs to Corsairs. So they got hit with a few things. So let me pull them up.
Yeah, I mean, those are the two of the strongest teams, other than Sanctifiers, I would say, going in, were Felgor and Corsairs.
Yeah, I played quite a bit of Blades of Cain before, so I was quite used to running 7-inch move elves. But it was a bit of an adjustment going from true 3 APL operatives to running operatives only 2.5 or two actions. So I really did miss like the double shoot and double fight, but we can talk about that later. So yeah, the main changes to the Corsairs with this Dataslate is the biggest one, one of the big ones. It's kind of 3 big changes. The first one is the warding shield. Their version of Just a Scratch only works for normals now. This was kind of, I think a lot of Corsair players were expecting this. Like it will impact the team against some teams, which often rely on crits. So like Hand of the Archon or other factions that can reliably retain quite a few crits will be able to get through this. But I don't think that will kill the team. They also changed the ability of the Kernite Hunter. So for those who don't know, he's the guy with the bird. In the strat phase, the Birdman can mark someone within 9. It doesn't have to be visible. And during that turn, if that operative makes a move or any type of movement, the Birdman can either do a reposition or charge the operative that's moving. So you can do some really kind of crazy things. You could have done some really crazy things with this. So you could like kind of charge them, and if they try to fall back, you could then do the charge again. It's just a very hard operative to kind of deal with. So they basically, because it can fight first, they basically cut down its ability to do so. So instead, it only works if it's ready, which is quite a nice change, I think. But the biggest loser of the Dataslate for the elves, for the Corsairs, is the Shade Runner. So she can no longer do her slicing attack if the operative she wants to do it at is not visible at the beginning of her activation, which is massive. Because she's quite an important operative into some of these 10 moon melee teams, like the goats and the Goremongers, just to try and chip them down a bit. And she also can't do the warp jump if she's dashed as well, so it's kind of cut down on her mobility a bit. So these are quite big changes.
Yeah, I guess with the Shade Runner, and I was definitely hoping for nerfs to the Kernite Hunter and the Wayseeker, the Just a Scratch. But some of the nerfs to the Shade Runner surprised me a little, and I think I almost feel like it was a little too much, and they could have maybe just kept all the stuff they got rid of, but not let her jump over ITD walls, and then I think it would have been okay.
Yeah, it feels a little bit heavy-handed. Like her chip is actually really important for some matchups, as I was talking about earlier. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Corsair players continue to take her, or if there are times now where you could potentially drop her. But the threat of a charge from 7 inches is still pretty strong. So
yeah, she's definitely a great operative still. I mean, she basically flies. It's like Butterfly. And her melee damage is still decent. It's obviously not as good as damage-wise, it's not as good as a power weapon, but it's quite reliable with the ceaseless on there. So I don't know. I do like the model still. It did feel like they maybe overtouched her. I mean, Max, you're not a Corsair player, but you did play against George's Corsairs. Do you have any thoughts on these?
Well, I think the Shade Runner, I think the main idea was stopping it working through ITD walls, and that's going to be a big blow to it. And if they just made that one carve out saying it didn't work on ITD, that would be the thing. But yeah, the chip damage comes in clutch, and definitely helped chip down getting to those breakpoints, and on the topic of breakpoints, as a as a certified Phobos enjoyer, the changes to the warding shield is huge, and specifically from that one matchup's perspective, not being able to shut down crits is huge because it just means then you can do your critical shot and deal your guaranteed 8 by getting a hit and a crit through. So that one specific interaction is one that I identified with my experience on Phobos, but it's small changes like that will have big impacts on those individual matchups for sure.
Yeah, also guns with like lots of rending and stuff as well. It's like other shuriken pistols or stuff stuff with severe or stuff which you can kind of guarantee a lot of crits with. It's it's definitely a big change.
Okay, I do want to touch on. Let's go over the dwarves really quick. So I mean, just really quick, the salvagers. They basically just nerfed the Alpha Strike, which I think did need to happen. I think the Jump Pack Warrior, so his move went from 8 to 7. I always felt that 8 was a little crazy. It's like their normal movement's 5. Like I didn't think it needed to be 8 inches. But my problem is, and the other change being the Writ of Claim is no longer adding to the initiative. It's just a reroll. My big problem is that I think they needed to nerf the alpha and then give them like compensate in some way, because the team actually isn't that great. They really lean on that alpha, and so when you just hit the alpha and change nothing else, I think salvagers are like kind of, and you guys have some experience against the team, but so let me know if you disagree, but I think salvagers are like kind of in a really bad place now, like definitely in the bottom third, I would say, of teams after this change.
I don't know. I've been talking to some Salvager players, and not all of them are doing the alpha on turning point 1. Like I think the threat of it is strong, but I think some of them have been kind of delaying it because I think it is one of the strongest operatives. So I think it might require a shift in play style, but keeping the Jump Back Warrior for the later turns might kind of work out for them and help them score attack ops and stuff. So it's definitely a big change. But I do think people have been having some. I think Bart in the UK has been having success with a more conservative use of his Jump Back Warrior.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. They've got their identity of stacking crits being their one niche, and as a result of that, I think they're always going to be a bit of a meta pick depending on what things are ebbing and flowing. I mean, at the beginning of the edition, when elites were ignoring piercing, they became a great choice to just push through some crits. So I think it's going to be factors like that just every so often they'll pop back up again, because what they do is powerful. It just might not be strictly the best thing to be doing at any one time.
Yeah. And then on the other side, we have my personal favorite dwarves, which is the Harnkin Jaegers, and I've been hoping for a Jaeger buff for quite a bit. I thought they were in a pretty rough spot. And now, to just sum it up really quick, the Masterful Bladework ploy, if you're fulfilling the conditions, you actually add 1 attack to your melee. You don't just get balanced. And the Plasma Knife equipment says if you already have a Plasma Knife, you get balanced built in. And the other change to the Masterful Bladework says if you already have balanced, it becomes ceaseless. So the shotgun guys are getting knives with a lot of the time 4 attacks balanced, which is really good. And then the knife guys are getting 4 attacks on 4s with ceaseless, which is great. So I love that. Overall, the big problem to me was last edition, you would take the knives on a lot of guys. And so what would happen is, aside from the guys that never fought anyway, your whole team pretty much had 4 attacks in melee on these knives. And what they did was they gave everybody knives this edition with the equipment piece, but it's 3 attack knives. So considering most of your team already had them, what effectively happened was you just lost an attack on most of your guys' melee. This gives it back to them to a more situational degree, and I'm really excited for it. I think it really helps them with their offensive output, both in terms of just retaliating and the consistency with which you can hit a guy with a crit 5 damage before you go down, and also just the ability for your shotgun guys to use that resourceful token to go 3 AP and get a double kill with a charge fight shoot, which wasn't really reliably ever happening before against a full health opponent anyway. So I love that. And then on top of that, they made stalwart defense. You no longer lose 1 on your hit stat when you're doing the counter shoot, which is really crazy. Do either of you guys have any thoughts on the Jaeger changes?
I'm excited for it. I was picking them up as they released at the end of last edition, and I've been looking for an excuse to pick them up again. I think they're great models. I love their playstyle, and yeah, this is definitely gonna get me to dust them off again.
George, any thoughts?
No, just excited to see what people can kind of do with the changes.
Yeah,
So they're a cool team. So
they're very cool. They're one of my favorites. I've been wanting to take them off the shelf and play them again. This might just be the nudge that I need. I do want to make a quick highlight about that stalwart ploy, and I was talking to you about this before we started recording, Max. But with that ploy being the way that it is, it's really, really good, and I think it's one of their best tools because it's one of those ploys where you like read it a couple times and you think, oh, that's pretty good, but then like when you play the team and start reading the ploy and like checking for the restrictions, and you kind of realize that there aren't many restrictions. You just need to be within 6 of the guy that gets charged. But like, you can have your sniper be within 6 of people to get charged, and he can. It doesn't matter if he's ready. It doesn't matter if he's shot already in the turn. So you can get that counter shot and get another shot with him, and get 2 shots off with your sniper in 1 turn, or maybe not your sniper, your tracker who has silent.
It's a hatchet guy. Yeah, they've got quite a few sources of silent, right? The guy with the crossbow and
yeah, and like the crossbow. Well, the hatchet in particular is really good because it hits on 3s, and so if you wanted to do it before, you could, but you'd be hitting on 4s, so it would get a little bit dicey. But now, I mean, it's actually it's a pretty nice option to have.
Yeah, and with 4 attacks in melee as well, more chance of getting a crit to hit that. Those break points as well.
And for a team that is inherently really good at counterpunching, making them so unappealing to charge on top of that already with like the half damage, and you're going to eat a 5 damage crit, it's going to be really hard. Like even Marines are going to have a hard time like charging and taking out a Jaeger with a shotgun. Like you charge that guy, the sniper shoots you with a piercing 1 sniper rifle, by the way, and probably does like 6 to 9 damage to you. And then you fight, and you're probably going to have to eat a 5 damage crit from the plasma knife. And that's like, if the sniper gets 4 hits, even if without a crit, if the sniper gets 4 hits, then there's a good chance you take 9 damage, which means that 5 damage crit on the plasma knife is just going to kill the Marine on the charge. So pretty spicy defensive tech there from Jaegers. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about Jaegers. What I want to move on to is...
Should talk about the elephant in the room, the Sanctifier nerf.
The Sanctifier nerf. I honestly wasn't even going to talk about it, but that's probably a good idea to bring up. They did what I thought they would do, which was get rid of procession on turn 1. I think this is a great change for now. I do still think the team is really, really good and is going to be a problem, but it lets us play the game on turn 1 against them, and then lets the Sanctifier players for 3 months now. They can kind of push the limits of this kit without turn 1 cheese, and we can really figure out just how like kind of busted this team actually is. So I mean, George, do you want to go ahead and talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, I've played against them a few times now, and they have all the ingredients for an absolutely amazing team, even if you discount the Turning Point 1 alpha. So the biggest thing is all the out of activation dashes and shots, particularly in the shot phase as well. The lead the process, was it rallying the flock? I haven't seen too many people talk about that. But the fact that you have like shot phase movement, so you can you've got 11 activations. You can see where your opponent's staged in Turning Point 1. You can then you basically have complete control over what operatives you kind of expose and which operatives you're kind of putting up to trade. I think they're going to really reward people who are really good at kind of like judging threat ranges and figuring out like how much risk to take on Turning Point 1 and Turning Point 2. And then they just have like really, really strong tools with like the Confessor being able to say no to double bites, double shoots, and the Justice Scratch in melee, and the 25mm bases, which people aren't talking about as well. So what you can do is you can kind of create one-way routes in the midboard, So if you put a barricade up against like a heavy like bit of terrain, if the Sanctifier player leaves a 25 millimeter gap, a lot of the time only they can move through it, but their opponent will have to pay the 2-inch traverse. So I think there's going to be people exploring quite a lot of that aspects of it, of the team as well, and kind of digging into their board control and movement tricks. So it'd be cool to see. Well, cool, but it's going to be interesting to see how far people can kind of push the team before the next round of nerfs.
Yeah, I mean, Max, did you have any thoughts on Sanctifiers before we move on?
Well, I think getting rid of the the craziness of doing everything turn one, I think it'll just let us all get a bit more of an objective look on what this team actually does. What are their main things to look out for without having to constantly be on your guard about losing the game on turn one. It should give us at least a little bit of time to just figure out, okay, their movement shenanigans, that's the hallmark of their team. They can do really crazy things with their positioning, and then these are the things to look out for. And I think it's definitely a very positive change, and I mean, they could still be a problem, but at least now we'll have a bit more time to judge them more objectively.
And they are hard to play as well. And they're hard to play, especially under a clock as well. So I think that's the biggest thing for competitive play.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I pretty much agree with you guys. I think the team is going to be very good still, but it's always a lot to ask, I feel, for nerfs for a team that just came out. And I think this is as good as we could have realistically expected for now.
Yep.
Man, and yeah, I think they're going to be less of a pain to play against, even if they are a top-tier team. Not every top-tier team is a nightmare to play against. Sometimes you can have a fun experience playing into a team that's good. They were not very fun to play against before, and I think now it's going to be a little bit less of a horrible play experience on the other side. So, yeah. I do want to talk about, and we can talk about these teams kind of side by side, but I've been looking at these two teams all day, like looking at their changes. And that's Kasrkin and Scions. So Echelons and Kasrkin, I guess. Both teams very similar to each other. Both, mid-range guard teams. Although now Echelons are like a kind of like a semi-horde now with 11 operatives. And I think both of these teams have had quite a bit of life breathed into them with these changes. And I'm actually curious because they were both really, I mean, Kasrkin was really tragic before this Dataslate. And I'm not sure if this makes them like good, but I think it gives them a niche. And I guess, so to boil it down, I think these changes give them more of like a element of everybody on the team, not just the gunners, are actual threats. And they're like layering these weapon rules on top of each other. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of when I was playing Kroot. Because Kroot, if I got all the buffs together, I feel like I'm shooting with like Ceaseless, Severe, Piercing, Lethal 5, and it's a weak weapon, but you put enough of those together and it's going to do a lot of damage to anything that isn't like a 14 wound Plague Marine. And you give that element to a team like Kasrkin, where they do also have meltaguns and plasma guns and stuff. And I think it kind of it introduces an element to the team that is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
you go, George.
No, you've gone.
They're a team that just I love their identity last edition, and now it just feels like they're doing whatever they want to do reliably. They can stack their keywords and all of their regular shooting. They've got gunners up the wazoo, but I think they're just still too fair. They don't have any little bit extra to push them over the top that's going to make them a real threat, and I think they're going to be a lot more fun to play now, and they're going to be able to contend with some of the other stuff that's going on, but putting them against some of the top tier 1s or mid tier 2 teams, I think they're going to really struggle. But I'm very excited to break them out again and have a look, because I love the models, and just regular elite military dudes are always a good time.
Yeah, the Aquilons going to 11 activations is huge as well. Like, that's probably like the biggest buff any team can get, an extra activation. That's like an extra model to plant beacon, that's an extra model to contest one of the other objectives. That's another model to wait out your drops into only 0.2. Yeah, I think Aquilon's going to be really. Then it's cool. It's cool seeing the difference between the two teams. Shane, you're telling me earlier you had some thoughts about the difference between the Kasrkins and the Aquilons.
Yeah, and I think you could almost do a whole video about it, but to boil it down, it's really hard to like. I look at the teams side by side, and I did kind of like a little deep dive earlier today, just like comparing them, and it's interesting because they get very similar buffs. So I mean, their base weapons are 4-on-3s, 3/4, and both teams get severe. Kasser can get it quite easier now, especially after the buff. Whereas Accolons, it's only against ready operatives. Accolons get kind of situational balanced, as in like the first half of their activations on a turn get balanced, whereas Caster can now get ceaseless in a bubble if you're shooting a guy in the bubble and your guy that is doing the shooting is in the bubble. So they both have rerolls. And then Casterkin has like this awesome comm specialist that can buff multiple guys, and they have the strategy phase dashes. But Accolons have literally dropping from the sky being their ability, which I do still think is a very strong ability. If you're using your drop tokens correctly and like staging them in really threatening ways. So like what it boils down to kind of is that the Casterkin has more consistent threat across the board, but Accolons, they have the extra activation. They have another weapon with piercing 2 other than their Melta, which I think goes a really long way with the Melta bomb.
Mm-hmm. The free mission action as well.
Yeah, I mean a free mission action.
It's pretty good.
The Scions in general, the Echelons, they just have really great firefight ploys, and it gives them like a really nice flexibility with free mission actions, and now with hot drop being a lot more reliable, you do have situational access to pretty good relentless. So yeah. It's a really hard thing to weigh which of these teams is better. My gut says Accolons, but I can't help but feel like Casterkin are going to be like maybe more of a mental load, but with similar potential or maybe greater potential. And I really don't know. I think both teams, there's a lot to explore here after the changes, and I'm curious to see what people do with them.
Yeah, they're cool. The one big thing, so I remember playing,
especially on the Casterkin, so much
fast edition, where them only having 1 or 2 melee threats, and anything that's kind of expended on the midline can kind of be charged and be kind of held up in combat. So it's gonna be interesting to see like if not having many melee models is a big of a kind of downside as it kind of seems strategically, just from kind of prior play experience. Sorry, I think we spoke up, Max. So yes, the biggest thing is them not having many models. So
for a lot of the first few months of this edition, they just became attached to inquisitorial agents, and so many people just wrote them off and didn't give them much time because that's what they became. Just you can attach these to inquisitorial agents. Now at least I think they're breathing room where people can experiment with them and see, okay, what's their viability on their own, and not just as the keys to the inquisitorial.
Yeah, and to kind of backpack off of that take, it is very deliberate, and I like this, that they are buffing Casterkin in a way that it doesn't touch the data sheets at all, which means that agents are not going to feel any of these changes. And you do have to think a little bit outside of the box when you're balancing a team that way. And I think they've done a pretty good job. I'm not 100% sure if Casterkin have everything they need, but I do think with these changes, Casterkin are kind of back to their roots a little bit of being an elite killer, where I think they were maybe supposed to be still, but it just, the teeth weren't there. And now I think with all these buffs, and especially, when you're playing a team that has a lot of layered buffs where you have to like stack these conditions on, it's a lot easier to do against a team that you out-activate. So I think in practice, it's going to be a lot easier for Casterkin to punish elites than other teams maybe, including Echelons. So, there's a lot here, and I know there's a lot of Casterkin diehards out there. And I think these changes are pretty cool. I personally like anything that makes the hot shot las guns better because I find those cool. I don't know why.
Yeah, they're awesome.
But I guess only a couple more teams I want to touch on before we talk about the GT. I think the big one is Pathfinders. Pathfinders are, they were a nightmare, like very, very strong team for a long time last edition. For pretty much all of last edition, they were a scary team at worst. Like even when they weren't good, they were kind of a boogeyman where nobody wanted to play against them. And then they came into this edition just dreadful. And I think with some of these changes, they're not back to like their glory days, but it looks a bit familiar, doesn't it? George, why don't you start?
Yeah, I've got severe Pathfinder PTSD from last edition.
Don't we all?
Yeah, that point blank piece without play looks pretty good. I'm just thinking if I'm an elf player, charging a Pathfinder now sounds a lot less something you have to worry about. In case they do 8 damage on the charge, which doesn't sound fun. And them just sitting on 3s with the balance, that's a massive change. Yeah, they've definitely got some teeth now.
Yeah, it's always a scary thought whenever the attention of GW gets focused on making Pathfinders have some changes and having the extra balanced on their first marker light's definitely going to give a bit more oomph when they've got their usual hitting on 4s, and it's going to get them started a little bit earlier, and then when they go up to hitting on 3s on the second marker light, it's really going to improve their reliability again. So scary times with these good shooting operatives they've got.
Yeah, and I mean, I just see this sort of like I think they have the potential maybe to bully elites. You stack the marker lights on, and you give a gunner a third APL, and they run up and just go to town. And I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting, and it's I think people are gonna now, because I personally took a look, like another like thorough look at their rules for the first time since we even got the rules, and they've still got the high intensity marker light, which will plot, because now I think the real thing is getting 2 marker lights on. Anything more than that is not totally necessary.
Yep.
You get 2 marker lights on, and you're in business on pretty much every gun on your team. With you've got the and I guess when you're talking about getting 2 marker lights, they have a lot of ways to get there. They've got the
equipment. They got the equipment. They got the recon drone who can hand it out in an area. They have the high intensity. They've got the one which counts the targeting upticks or something.
Yeah, where you count as +1. Yeah. And then the blooded Pathfinder too. That specialist, the silent guy. He now has a rule this edition where if during the turn when you use the Art of War, he can do, if you picked Montka, which I imagine you will most of the time, he gets to use Kalyan during his activation. So Kalyan lets you do, if you have a conceal order, you can do a free marker light action. So, and this is the guy with silent, so he can move, pop a marker light on a guy, and then shoot him. So, I mean, it's pretty nice. Like, there's a lot of stuff here,
and new stuff too as well. Like with the grab drone as well. I know some Pathfinder players were experimenting with that as well. So it'd be cool to see what they do.
Yeah, 12 operatives at the end of the day, and almost all of them are killy. I mean, I guess if you take like one of the more tech drones, like the grav drone, then maybe 1 or 2 of your guys isn't killy. But at their heyday, what I always hated about Pathfinders was that once you get the marker lights on, just a couple of them, even like your most basic guys are 4 on 3s, 4-5 balanced.
The medic, he's calling an ambulance for you.
Yeah, yeah, he really is. And they're on top of that. They've also got so bonded now gives accurate 1. Last edition it was balanced. But I mean, this team doesn't really, outside of like the rail rifles, you're not like super fishing for crits a lot of the time because their base damage is really high. So like accurate 1, 4 attacks on 3s, balance accurate 1, 4-5. At like the worst weapon that you have is like really, really good. So yeah, Pathfinders, maybe they're back. They might be back, guys.
Oh, don't jinx it. Don't want to entertain what.
Yeah, and I guess the only other big changes, I mean, they did nerf Warp Coven, George. The Capricious Plan is a little bit more reasonable now.
Yeah, flipping back to conceal after shooting is probably the strongest thing in the game. So yeah, anything that makes that slightly weaker is good.
Yeah, happy for that. The only other thing I can think of off the top of my, they did do a weird little nerf to Hand of the Archon, which I thought was not necessary, but
Hand of the Archon definitely caught that stray. Like that
Yeah.
seems a bit, yeah.
yeah, they're
I'm very happy they cleaned up the Nemesis Claw, Return to Darkness, actually returning to the light on ITD. I think it was
yeah.
a very egregious case of rules as written and rules as intent showing one thing, but people interpreting another way. So I'm glad they cleaned that up.
Yep. Happy with that. Totally agreed. There's also the what was it? The ratlings. I know some ratling players are not going to love this, but I'm really glad that you can't put those stupid tripwires on the doors anymore.
Yep.
It just felt like we kind of had like a whole like FAQ errata where all the equipment can't get placed near doors, and then ratlings come out and they're like, oh, by the way, they can, nobody else can, just them. So that's a good thing, I think, for the game, them not being able to do that. And then the only other thing of note is the Vespid buffs. I mean, Vespids, the V tier kings, they are also 11 operatives now. I think they're still fundamentally not good, but they have a lot more punch. So, which is like inching them more towards Rekka territory, where like I look at Rekkas and I just can't accept Rekkas as a good team. But they do hit really hard, and that can carry you a little bit. And Vespids, kind of before, they were like a bad team and they didn't even hit that hard, but now, they got the extra body. Their melee's a little bit better. Still not great. They cleaned up the Skytorch guy. Yeah, I don't know. It's still bad, right? What do you guys think?
They still need some way to get more APL. If they added something where Communion, you could spend maybe 2 or 3 points to give a guy an extra APL, that'll really be a big boost to the team, because right now the big thing bringing them down is just all they can do is move, shoot, or move mission action. And when you've got those as your only real options, it's very limiting to what you can possibly do.
Yeah, I mean, George, do you have any thoughts on Vespids?
I think they fall into similar, like basically what Max said. I think not being able to, but being bumped up to 3 APL means you can't have those kind of power plays. So a lot of the activations are pretty linear. They're quite predictable, and yeah, but definitely more playable than before. So
yeah, I mean, I was hoping that they'd give the drone a comms ability, but alas, didn't get that. The only extra action economy they have now, the Skytorch assault action, that's a new thing. They can move like 8 inches and shoot for 2 AP, which is, I mean, that for Vespids, that's a lot of things in one. You're moving 8 inches and then shooting with your worst weapon. Hey, it's something, I guess.
Huge.
Yeah. So let's stop talking about the changes, because I think that pretty much touches everything that is noteworthy. I mean, Gellerpox can take their 4 mutants now. They got a little nice buff with Blessings of Infection, but nothing huge. And then Plague Marines lost Cloud of Flies 3 inches for some reason. But yeah, other than that kind of, I mean, I guess in general, before we move on to the GT, like from a more broad perspective, I guess, George, you first. Where do we think the meta is right now? Like, what's the big bads?
I think Elves probably definitely took a hit here. I think the rise of Pathfinders, that's quite scary. I'm going to have to play that matchup a few times just to kind of get a sense for it. And then with Pelgor and Goremongers still running around, like they're 2 tough matchups. But I think Elites are probably still going to be quite strong as well, which is probably a very, very cold take. I think Nemesis Claw, being able to have 7 activations against other elites, and kind of with Vox Scream and stuff, they could probably be quite good into the elite mirrors. That's something I'm kind of looking at. So maybe elves have a place to kind of counter the elites, maybe still. But yeah, so it's gonna be cool to see where the Aquilons, the 10/11 men operative shooty teams kind of fall, like, because that's definitely like a part of the meta that we haven't kind of really explored this edition yet.
Yeah, Max, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think the changes are going to shake up the meta in a massive degree as it has been in past data slates. I think obviously elites are relatively unscathed this time round, apart from the small tinkers to Nemesis Claw and Warp Cavern. So I think they're really gonna have a bit of resurgence if they've not been having a downtick anyway. Elves, of course, are still going to be well positioned to take them on. They've just been toned down a little bit. I think it's going to be a relatively sensible meta, but there's a lot of room for exploitation, and don't get complacent.
Yeah,
Sorry, Sanctifiers is up there as well. I think they're probably still going to be defining the meta as well if people are on them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Sanctifiers are probably the best team still, but I mean, obviously, the Sanctifier players are going to have to, spread their wings a little bit and lean on a little bit more than the turn one stuff. But I mean, I think to echo what you guys said, Elite's looking really good right now. It was a little scary for them for like a minute because elves seemed to be really prevalent, and now elves have been beaten down a little bit more. So I think Elite's really like that. Outside of that, I think Goremongers are pretty interesting. They've still got a couple problem matchups, but I do like that team a lot. You know, they're very strong, and unlike Sanctifiers, didn't catch a early nerf, which I didn't think they should. So happy about that. And you know, my beloved Hyrotech. This is the first time ever where I've felt okay about Hyrotech, and they didn't instantly catch a nerf. So happy for that. Maybe I'll play them a little bit more. I think it's. I want to play Jaegers. There's a lot of teams I want to explore, and I think there's. I think the meta is pretty decent again. I think that it's not as harmonious as it was right before Blood and Zeal dropped, but it's closer to that than it was just a few days ago. So.
There are a lot of viable teams. So there's probably something in each archetype that people can kind of play.
Yeah.
I think as long as you know your team really well, you can still do well at tournaments, which is good to see.
For sure. All right, so let's talk about the GT, the Chimera GT. So this is an event over at Chimera Gaming, over in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And this is the second year we did this event. Last year it was 5 rounds Saturday, Sunday. This year it was 6 rounds Saturday, Sunday, three each day, and really great time both events. I mean, this year I think we had 34 players, something like that, 35,
Somewhere around there.
I think 35 because there was a bye. So the interesting thing, first of all, about this the little meta that we had at this tournament was there was no team with more than 3 players, which meant that we saw a lot of different factions. It wasn't like one gatekeeper team kind of like holding people back. And, only one player brought Sanctifiers too. And this was pre-nerf Sanctifiers. And that was Joe. Really bad guy for bringing Sanctifiers. We hate him. Just kidding. Down. Yeah, just kidding. Joe's a great guy. And Sanctifiers did not win the event. So I believe he went like 4-2 or something. But yeah, I mean, obviously we had Max, you in first place with Felgors. You were the only Felgor, I believe. George, I think you were second with Corsairs. David was third with Nemesis Claw, and he got the golden ticket, so congratulations to him. And then I was sitting in fourth with my little Hyrotech circle. So I mean, it was a good time.
It's also Davey in fifth with Novitiates as well.
Yeah, Davey.
Yep.
who gave me my loss, playing novitiates of all things. I mean, I definitely was not prepared for novitiates, needless to say. Um, but yeah, I mean, let's talk a little. I mean, we'll go one by one. Max, we'll start with you. Um, I mean, Felgors. This was your first like tournament with Felgors, right?
That's right, and I played a local league, just one match every 2 weeks or so, just trying to get warmed up into them. Previously, I'd really been playing the elites religiously. Phobos, I took them to LVO, so it was a fun experiment to take a relatively new team. But I mean, you've beaten me enough with them that I figured if you can't beat them, join them, and it was a really interesting experience to take them with not entirely having my feet under me, but through the course of the tournament, figuring out, okay, these are my key operatives. These are the ones that I can have babysit my home objective. These are going to be my turn one gambits, let's say, and just growing that through the course of the tournament. It was really satisfying to just work on that and through a real baptism by fire. And I had some really tight. My first match was against Goremongers, which I was very scared about, knowing that it's going to be a tricky matchup. Initially, I was thinking, okay, well, melee against melee, I can out activate. They're going to do their stuff, but the half damage I didn't realize until the match itself is on every single time that you fight, rather than just once per turn.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the half damage, that was one thing
That is
that
absolutely
really.
huge against a team like Felgor, and so very early on.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's terrifying. Now, thankfully, in my round one, I was able to get a very nice Blood Sense GA2 double kill, which really set up the rest of the game to swing my way. But if not for that, I would have had a much harder time. And in fact, I played the matchup again in the finals against Voyen. Voyen, traditionally the bane of my existence at Chimera, always sniping me from going X and O at a tournament at Chimera. I think I was going into the game against him, especially in the Goremongers matchup, and again, it was built up that chip damage with the tech curse, which kept his leader back, and just really pushing hard on one side of the board that I was able to swing it, because I'm still not confident in that matchup. I think it's now that Felgor's been toned down with some of their chip damage, I think the Goremong is going to be even scarier.
yeah. I definitely would agree that the matchup got a little bit harder after the nerfs. It was one of the ones I was most scared of. I was excited to see you beat them twice because it gave me a little bit of hope in the matchup as a another Felgor player. But yeah, I think you might be onto something that probably gets a little harder now. I mean, the other big one was Plague Marines for me, and I believe you didn't play against any plagues, right?
Thank goodness for that. Yeah, the 3-1 I was really scared of going into Exaction Squad, Plague Marines, and Goremongers, and I was very glad to only face one of those three, albeit twice.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always scary. I mean, I guess you know it makes sense. Felgor is a strong team, but I mean, right now nothing has. There's not really a team out there that has no bad matchups. I think, and honestly, I think I've personally been comparing Felgor and Goremonger side by side a little bit, and I think that Felgor have a couple more bad matchups than Goremongers, but I think the matchups that Goremongers lose are like really insurmountable, whereas Felgor are just like maybe narrowly unfavored in their bad matchups. So I think even and that kind of rings true, I believe, after the nerfs. So I mean, I want to pivot a little to George. George, you took Corsairs. You mentioned earlier you're playing a lot of Blades of Cain. I mean, what went into that pivot? I know you played Corsairs last edition a little bit, but I mean, how'd you make the change?
So they were my best painted team, and I felt like they would kind of deserve to be taken out for one last spin before the potential rotation at the end of the year. And with this meta, with them being strong against the, I was expecting quite a lot of Goremongers, Blades of Cain, because there are two very strong Blades of Cain players coming, Milton from Vermont and your local Greg. And I played that matchup a few times, and I think Voidsguard were pretty favored in that one. And there's a lot of hype around Sanctifiers, so I was expecting quite a few elite players to be running around as well. So I just wanted to tech into an elf team which could handle those two matchups pretty well, and I think Voice Guard fit the bill for that. But yeah, like as I was mentioning earlier, it's really cool to see the difference between the two teams. So coming from Blaze of Cain, I was quite used to having native 3 APL on all my models and quite a bit of redundancy, and having the ability to double shoot and double fight when you need it is really, really strong. So that was quite an adjustment I had to make on the fly at the tournament, being limited to one of those actions during each activation. But the really cool thing I kind of figured out with Void Guard is this team is all about kind of setting up power plays with the comms guy. So you chuck someone an APL, then you shoot a Corsair like a missile down the board, hopefully to charge, fight, shoot something, or move, dash, shoot, and they can be really reliable this edition with both outcasts and the balance ploy. So if you manage to have punishing and balance on your shuriken and combat weapons, it gives you an insane amount of reliability across the whole team. So a lot of my play was being really careful with my positioning and making sure, like, whenever I was fighting or shooting, I had ideally both those buffs up at the same time, which helped a lot with the 4 attack dice.
Nice. Yeah, so I mean, Felgor Corsair is a very good team. Couple of teams. I personally, I ran Hyrotech Circle. I made a return to them at the Chimera GT. Obviously, I'd played them at Worlds, and it's following Worlds, they received a pretty hefty nerf, specifically to the Psychomancer, which is what I played a lot at Worlds. I think 8 of my 10 games were Psychomancer. Probably should have been more than that. But yeah, I really enjoyed playing Chronomancer, though. Well, even way back then, I just always felt like that was the most fun way to play the team and the most skill expressive way to play the team. But I just felt like the Psychomancer is way too good that I couldn't really pass it up in a lot of matchups. But now I kind of revisited last week, and I was kind of planning on playing Plague Marines, but I just got really bored of them. So I'm like, let's just pivot. Let's look at Hyrotech. And I was like, well, now Chronomancer is the best one by far. So I have no excuse now but to play Chrono if I run Hyrotech. So I was like, let's just do this. Let's see how far we can push it. And I learned, I mean, I already knew this, but like I really like pushed it a little bit more and like experimented with it. The extent of like their Alpha Strike potential on turn 1, it's like kind of insane. Just the
I wasn't actually aware of this before the tournament. So I was reading up on it as soon as I saw that you took Hyrotech. So I don't think it's that well known among the people who aren't that specialized or who don't regularly play against Hyrotech. So that'd be quite cool to share.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share it. I didn't end up doing it. I only did it into the elites because the truth is the Alpha Strike is really only good into elites or other teams without much long range capability, and even then it relies on them overextending a little bit. But the gist of it really is that when you look at the combinations between you put an Immortal, for instance, on Engage and just kind of pass him in your backline, and now he's expended, which means he's eligible for Time Splinter, which is a Chronomancer ability where you select an expended operative within 6 inches of you, and then you replace him somewhere else within 6 inches of you. So if you say have an expended Immortal in your backline on Engage, and then your next activation you walk up your Chronomancer 6 inches forward, pick him up, throw him 6 inches in front of the Chronomancer, so like, and it's only within, not wholly within, so it's really like almost 14 inches of movement potentially. And then since he's on Engage, you magnify shoot through him, and it creates, like, if you're using the Ion Stave with Blast, for instance, I mean, you can get some absolutely insane shots into the backline, and that's just the doing it on turn 1. And what I realized was that into elites, which I played a lot of Kroot before, and I played a lot of teams that I found were really struggling into elites, and I just hated the elite matchup. And so into elites, they have 6 operatives, you have 8. So you wait until they're done activating, and then you put that immortal on engage, and next activation, you move the chronomancer up, shoot them for free, and then if you have last activation, like if they went first, then you can, if you had saved your Apprentech, it's actually even crazier because let's say the immortal that you teleported forward is the Despotech, then when you're done doing the Chronomancer Alpha, the Apprentech doesn't even need visibility. It can be on the other side of the board. He can then command the Despotech to shoot because the interstitial command says you have to choose a guy within 6 of you or a guy within 6 of the Despotech. And the Despotech is within 6 of himself. So you can, anywhere the Despotech is, you can command him to do something with one of the other 2 guys. So you can potentially get like 2 shots off at the end of a turn with like very good weapons with rerolls on turn 1. And then if you win initiative turn 2, the game's just over. If it's not already over. Because realistically, let's say they win initiative on turn 2 and kill that guy. Then you just counter shoot with the guy that's alive and then wait until they're out of activations again and then reanimate the guy they killed with initiative, and then you can activate that guy because he's ready. So they just absolutely demolish elites, which I really liked. And I think it's probably the best team in the game against elites, if I'm being honest. And a lot of people, like you said, aren't super aware of it. But what I kind of did throughout the weekend, as I played more games, was kind of learn and figure out how to play that against teams that out-activate me, teams that I'm not going to get an alpha on turn 1 against. And it's kind of cool because you threaten the alpha, and I played my last game against Dave's Corsairs, and Dave spent the whole first turn just absolutely petrified of my ability to just launch a guy halfway down the board on turn 1, and I didn't end up doing it. What I did do is, and this was like where it all like kind of light bulb clicked for me, was this game. I just kept like everybody on my team basically in my drop zone and moved just the Chronomancer up like on a forward staging point and gave him Chronometron. And so Chronometron says that if the enemy targets the guy that has the Chronometron, they roll 1 less attack dice. So I have the Phase Shifter on. He's playing Corsairs. None of his weapons, other than the Heavy Gunner, is more than 4 attacks. So anything he comes into me with and breaks my cover is going to be 3 attacks. And his Piercing 2 guns, I can use Phase Shifter to reduce it to Piercing 1. So he really just has no real option to come hit me. And then it's okay that all of my models are in my deployment zone, because next turn I just play very passive, wait till the end of the turn, and then those guys that are in my deployment zone, I can just time splinter them forward, and now those guys are in the mid board. So you kind of invite this pressure onto yourself, and then counterpunch with like a hammer, and it's a very fun playstyle, and it feels like you're playing 4-dimensional chess, and it's really funny watching your opponent just like lose their mind. And yeah, I feel pretty good about higher tech right now. I definitely needed the 6 games to like relearn them. And
how do you feel into the 2 new teams?
Pretty
Goremongers
good.
and the Sanctifiers.
Yeah, Goremongers I feel great because I can safely put a lot of my backline guys on engage, which means there's less setup required for Time Splinter because they're not threatening long range really. And the same goes for Sanctifiers because they're mostly 6-inch range across the board with like a couple exceptions. So you can stage pretty aggressively. And the other thing with Sanctifiers is they don't have anything on their team with more than 4 attacks. So that's another team where you can stage forward with Chronometron, and they just can't hurt you really. And you just sort of rely on your counterpunch ability, which is really good. Yeah, I feel pretty good about higher tech. I wish I had gotten a little more practice the week before, once I'd chosen to play them, but unfortunately Oblivion came out last week, so like all my free time went away. But yeah, no, I'm excited to pick them back up. I think I'm not done with higher tech quite yet. And now I want to talk to you guys because you two played on stream. You were both 5-0. It was the fifth round. Obviously, Max took the win. But I guess Max, you first. I want to talk a little bit about like how that game went for you and like how you feel, or I guess how you felt about the Corsair matchup for Felgors.
Yeah, it's a scary one because I went into it with a couple of practice games before, thinking, oh no, this will be straightforward. It's just everything dies in 2 hits, and then George and I played a practice game the week leading up to the GT, and it really made me go, oh okay, let's let's not rest on our laurels here because they've got a lot of shenanigans that can go along and really ruin your day. So a lot of things going with the leader and being able to interrupt, sort of like the Dirge Maw sort of effect in the Mandrakes, where they can go first or like be the active operative in a fight. It's small things like that that really add up that make it quite a big brain load on you to try and not completely throw away the game. And a lot of it in our game, and I'll let on this as well, George, but it became, where can we stage where I'm not giving you all of your charges and move dash shoot sort of thing, which is going to chip me down to by a power sword. But then once I was able to stage up quite aggressively, it kept you in your back line, which allowed me to do really well on the crit op. And then back up with confirm kill is really, really straightforward with Felgor. So then at the latter ends of the games, I was able to have a very aggressive into your back line and just sweep around and set up a really powerful late stage GA2 play, which really put the final nail in.
And I guess too, like George, from your experience, like how are you feeling about the Felgor matchup beforehand? And I guess like what kind of like what was revealed to you, I guess, in this game?
So I think we were playing on secure, which is a good neutral mission. It's something that requires a mission action, so I was feeling pretty okay with that. I think something like transmission would have been quite a lot harder. I think the fact that the Corsairs can't double shoot or double fight is quite a big deal when kind of dealing with Felgors, because you often have to spend 2 different activations to kill one goat, but then they have the ability to double kill 2 elves quite easily. That was something I had to kind of pay attention to when setting up in the early game and stuff. So my plan was to kind of let Max kind of take the lead, bring him forward, and then kind of slowly pick up his goats while trying to keep as many of my guys alive. I think Corsairs do have some quite good playing to goats. They have some decent sources of stun. The stun attack from the Way Seeker is actually really good, especially on Into the Dark as well. I figured out, because if you put them on guard, you can stun someone on their own activation if you manage to get a shot, which is kind of quite cool tech. But we were playing on open, so I didn't really have access to that. So yeah, Max just kind of bullied me off the middle of the objective. He got quite a good back-breaking play with the blood sense off in 20.3. I think that kind of did me, but I managed to keep it close. So I think I lost by 2 points. So if
yeah, it was very close.
Yeah, if one or two things went my way, maybe I could have just stuck it. But yeah, it was a great game. Max is a great opponent, so yeah, really happy we got that on stream.
So, and I guess, George, are you planning on playing any more Corsairs, or was that kind of like your final voyage for them?
I don't know. Part of me wants to go back to Blades of Cain just to kind of take what I learned from playing Corsairs back to them. But it's tricky. I think regionally we're going to be running declassified tournaments as well, just for the time being, for our local regional events. So I'll have access to them after the rotation that happens at the end of the year. But it's especially if I might attend Worlds, part of me doesn't want to sink quite a lot of time into practicing one team that I might not be able to play there. So yeah, I'm definitely looking to take the lessons I learned from this event and apply them to the other elf teams and the other high tempo 8 to 9 model teams, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I guess Max, same question for you. Are you planning on? I mean, you've got your golden ticket, And I know you typically tend to stick with the team for at least a few months. But are you planning on playing more Felgors in like the coming months, or are you gonna like mess around with other stuff? Like what's your plan?
I've got one more big-ish tournament coming up, and that's going to be the Torchlight tournament coming up, I guess, middle of this month. Definitely going to take the Felgor to that one. I've made my nice display board, and I'm looking forward to showing that off to a new crowd. But definitely after that, where I've already got my golden ticket, I can start focusing on some of the other smaller weekly events sort of thing. I love experimenting more, and my thing from last year was I wanted to play a different team every month, and I want to keep that up this year as well, especially as George mentioned, going into rotation season. My main team has been for a long time, and I need to start thinking about what's going to be my team after that if I want to start taking them to majors and Games Workshop tournaments. So definitely going to be doing some experimentation. As you mentioned at the start of the podcast, Jaegers are looking very nice. I definitely want to dip into Nemesis Claw again. They were my babies towards the end of second edition, and closest match of the weekend was against David on his Nemesis Claw, and it really re-energized me wanting to get back to the spooky boys.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, as for me, like I said, I do want to keep playing a little more higher tech, but all these teams are calling my name. I think some of these teams are going to be like my fun little side projects, and then next time I go to a tournament where I want to try really hard, I think I will go back to higher tech because I feel like there's a lot to unearth there, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, it was a very good tournament. We saw David get the golden ticket with Nemesis Claw, which was really cool. There are a lot of tournaments coming up in the region. I guess, do you guys want to make a couple shout outs before we get out of here?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, Torchlight Games is running another golden ticket qualifying event. That's coming up on the 17th. That's sorry, on the 10th rather. So that's in not this weekend, but the weekend after. Great opportunity to get another golden ticket. And then 2 weeks after that, on the 24th, Top Shelf Collection in Oakville, Ontario, is going to be running a one-day triple golden ticket event, no less. Thankfully, they were able to rescue some of the golden tickets that were on offer from the CTC, the Canadian Tabletop Convention tournaments that they usually run. And George and I are going to be on hand helping TO that. And the big headline that was published today is first place is going to be securing not only a golden ticket, but also return flights to Atlanta for the World Championships. So that's going to be a huge benefit for those coming over from afar to qualify. So definitely come on down to those two. And George, you got any others to mention?
I think you covered it for the month of May. So yeah. So as Max mentioned, our scene's pretty active. Every month there's at least 2 or 3 tournaments. So we keep a pretty detailed calendar, and we coordinate our events on our local Discord, which is the Great Lakes Kill Team Discord. I think I spammed the invite link to that channel in the Canadian.
I'll put a link to it in
Yep.
the an invite link in the description of this video. So if you guys are in either whether it's Northeast, like New York, or I guess Northwest New York, or Ontario, Canada, just hop in and just see what we got, because there's a ton of events. I am planning on going to the 2 that you mentioned, Max. Definitely going to go to CTC. I want to go to Torchlight. We're going to see. But yeah, everybody else, I want to shout out to all of our Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/commandpoint. You guys rock. I'm gonna try to get some more stuff out for you soon. Obviously, shout out to our subscribers. We have like 10,500 of you now, which is just the coolest. Yeah, I mean, if you're listening, enjoying this, and you're not subscribed, please do. It'll make me very happy. You'll bring a smile to my face. And, of course, keep playing Kill Team. Post in the comments your thoughts on the Dataslate. I love to read those. And as always, have a good one, everybody. Thank you, Max and George, for coming on. Always a pleasure. Yeah, everybody else, have a good night.
Take care, guys.